In 2050, humanity is enjoying a better life than ever before, thanks to the rapid advancement of science and technology. However, the sudden appearance of wormholes changed everything. People stood and looked with mesmerizing emotions at the wormholes that were forming in the air above them. Suddenly the wormholes began to pulsate and make terrible sounds, and then terrible monster robots of unearthly origin began to appear from them. On the other side of the wormholes was another world. Unknown creatures arrived from there to Earth across millions of light years to take over the planet. The military weapons that people were proud of turned out to be completely ineffective against alien technology. People began to retreat, and everything around them plunged into chaos. However, at this time, a cultivator suddenly appeared, bringing a glimmer of hope to humanity. After huge losses, humanity finally changed the course of events, sending the aliens back into the wormhole. Thus, humanity found short-term peace. The art of cultivation again replaced science and became the subject of quests throughout the world. This event is known as the First Revolution of Cultivators. And then, the era of cultivation began, 50 years later. Some three guys stand and look in confusion at the main character, who is lying unconscious. They're trying to bring him to his senses. Suddenly, the guy began to regain consciousness and move his fingers a little. One of the guys points his finger at the man lying down and tries to understand what's wrong with him. But suddenly the lying hero grabs his hand. He stands up a little and pushes the bully away from him. The hooligans are a little surprised by what is happening, because they did not expect that the guy was able to get back on his feet. The main character's name was Tang Ming. He had a conflict with these three hooligans because he did not want to just give them money. Without thinking twice, the blonde bandit is not going to wait long, so he begins to attack the guy with an iron pipe in his hands. But this attack was too slow for the main character, so he easily dodges the bully's attack. And then with a furious look, he kicks the bully off his feet, thereby knocking him back with his blow. At the same moment, the other two bullies are shocked that Tang Ming was able to defeat their friend with one blow. This makes them angry, so they take out knives, and they start running at the main character from both sides, trying to surround him. Tang Ming dodges the first swing of the knife, and then immediately punches his opponent directly. The third bandit stops in his tracks from what he saw with his own eyes, but Tang Ming doesn't stop, so he immediately hits the remaining opponent with his elbow, thereby knocking him out. After defeating the hooligans, the guy begins to head towards one of the hooligans, but he tries to crawl back out of fear. Approaching the bandit, Tang Ming asks him what year it is. Because of the strange question, the bully is surprised by the words he hears, but the guy still continues to look intently at the bandit. Therefore, this greatly frightens the bully, and he begins to say that today is the 9th of April, 2100. The main character is a little shocked by this answer, because he understands that in 2100 he was in high school, and this meant that he was reborn into the past. He begins to remember what happened earlier, and realizes that in 2120, the alien army attacked again, and then the final battle for life took place. The hero recalled how he sat in front of one of the aliens, because he was tired of fighting hard, because no one could have thought that the aliens would also become cultivators and be able to break through the kingdom of saints, after which the aliens, preparing to attack the guy, tell him that human creatures were no match for them. And then he shoots with all his might at the main character, and his appearance gradually begins to disappear in a bright white light, because of which a strong explosion is formed in the place of the main character. Events flash back to 2100, where Tang Ming stands silently before the opponents he defeated. A bully holding his head with his hand, wondering if the main character was okay, but he was not going to answer his question, but on the contrary, with an angry look, he said that they should disappear from his eyes, and that he should no longer see them near the school. After this, the hooligans, without thinking twice, begin to run away from the main character with all their might. But suddenly Tang Ming stops them. The bullies with frightened faces silently look at the guy, after which they return the money to him. Tang Ming, while counting the bills, was a little surprised that Gao Hu had taken so much money from him during his year in high school. In a past life, the main character was an orphan. Through step-by-step efforts, he finally broke through the Emperor realm and became one of the leaders of the Cultivator Alliance. Standing in front of the high school grounds, he remembered his past life and couldn't believe that he lost to the aliens. He understood that at this time, no one now imagined that aliens would strike again in 20 years and all of humanity would die. Tang Ming pondered the words the stranger said in his direction about the kingdom of heaven, which is why he clenched his fist. And then he realized that since God gave him another chance, this time he must destroy all the aliens. Events are postponed until early the next morning. The main character, sitting on his bed in his room, tries to concentrate energy around himself. Having finished his workout, he looks at his hand with a smile and reflects on his achievements that he achieved overnight. In one night, he learned all the basic abilities of the cultivation high school. His goal was to regain his previous cultivation level. Wiping the sweat from himself, he was glad that he remembered his past life, so it would be easier for him to break through the first level. However, after the first level, he would need to break through the 9 gates, and then break through again and again. While getting dressed, he listed what kind of kingdoms there were. Even though he had broken through faster than in his previous life, it would still be difficult for him to reach the Saint Realm before the final battle. Therefore, he understood and was ready that he would have to train more. Events again moved to the school grounds, where around a girl named Wang Jin, who is simply walking around the school grounds, crowds of people gather around her and bless her beauty. The girl was not only beautiful, but also a cultivator of the Wang family. According to various rumors, it could be understood that at that age, she was already able to overcome the first level of high school. She passed by everyone, and from afar, under a tree, the main character looked at her. Looking at her, he recalled events from a past life, where high school student Wang Jin came from a family of Taoist cultivators. Then, she was an untouchable goddess for him. But this time he needed to cultivate using the microton tempering method. He had to help her. As night approached, Tang Ming stood around the corner of a cliff so that no one would see him. He was there because he knew what would happen to Wang Jin that night. The girl, having trained at night, will meet a criminal cultivator in this place. After a long battle, she will finally kill him, thereby gaining fame in the world of martial arts. But she herself will be seriously injured and will take a whole half a month to recover. Wang Jin, pursuing the criminal cultivator, was getting closer and closer to the main character. He had heard about the crimes of these cultivators, so he understood that the criminal was clearly lucky to meet her, because although she was young, she was already a strong fighter. The criminal, leaving the girl, introduced himself that his name was Zhao Hu. He offered her a good reward if she would let him go. But the girl didn't care about the criminal's offer because he was a first-class warrior, which meant that if she captured him, she would be able to return to the Cultivator Alliance. Zhao Hu, faced with this, decided to attack first, activating the abilities of the Fiery Tiger, which allowed him to quickly attack the enemy with his claws. But the girl was easily able to dodge all his attacks, and then she tried to attack in response, but the criminal was able to hide behind her sword with his magical hand. The girl jumped away from him to a safe distance for her, and his hand continued to glow with a red glow because these were signs of trained bones, muscles, and skin, which allowed first-class cultivators to defend themselves in this way from enemy attacks. There was fiery energy emanating from around the criminal. With an evil smile, he looked at the girl in surprise and could not believe that at that age she was already so strong, after which his eyes turned red and he began to prepare for a new attack. The girl immediately began to attack her opponent at high speed, swinging her sword in different directions. Watching from the side, Tang Ming immediately recognized this attack, because these movements symbolized the 4th-level skill Heaven and Earth, Xuanhuan. This skill was unique to the Wang family, and was more suitable for women, but Wang Jinqi was strong enough. As long as Zhao Hu protected the vital point, it would not be a problem for him to face Wang Jin's sword. Suddenly he catches and grabs the girl's sword, thus it does not immobilize her sword movements. By grabbing the girl with both hands, the criminal thereby exposes her to danger, because if Wang Jin does not recover, then she may die in this way. Suddenly a pebble flies into the criminal's head. Attacking from behind, Tang Ming didn't want to break through his arms, so he wanted to smash his skull. But Zhao Hu doesn't let the guy do this, so he turns sharply towards him and with a furious look swings his red fist at the main character. Fortunately, the main character manages to dodge and defend himself from the enemy's attack. His main goal was to free the girl from the criminal's cordon. He introduced himself as Wang Jin as a high school student, and came up with a story about how he got here so that the girl would not suspect anything. He understood that if the girl had hit the criminal from below, then he would definitely have died. Wang Jin, showing heroism, told the main character to leave here, but Tang Ming wanted to stay, because he understood that the girl herself would not be able to defeat the enemy because of her wound. After which he began to speak the words of a cultivator, which said that in the face of death, he goes to fight, saving his comrades. Immediately after the words were spoken, the criminal began to attack the guys with furious force, thereby not allowing them to finish. The girl, realizing that she cannot hesitate, accepts the help of the protagonist and asks him to gain some time, and she will finish him off with one blow. Faced hand-to-hand, Tang Ming was still able to stop the criminal's attack. Zhao Hu, with a trembling hand, is a little shocked by what is happening, but the hero, without thinking twice, raises his other hand to delay him as long as possible for the girl. But the criminal still stops the second attack of the protagonist. Suddenly Tang Ming turns to his opponent so that he looks at his hands, from which fiery tiger claws can be seen. Zhao Hu, in great confusion, could not understand how the guy got the tiger claws that he himself used. But the main character did not answer this question. He began to instantly attack his opponent, conducting quick attacks on the criminal, who repelled all of his attacks. Tang Ming realized that the opponent's skills were better than his, so he needed to come up with something to win. Continuing to hit Zhao Hu, the main character was impressed by his opponent, because he was beating a guy who was many times stronger than him. But suddenly he stops attacking and pushes away from him. And behind Tang Ming was a girl who had already activated her sword ability to finally defeat the criminal. Zhao Hu was shocked by what he saw, because he realized that it was the release of a blade, the ability of which was owned by the main family of the city. He does not have time to do anything, and therefore becomes vulnerable to the attack of the girl, who successfully takes his life with one swing of the sword. The defeated opponent falls to the ground. The main character, coming closer to the killed criminal, became convinced of the sword-release sword technique, because only a few people of high skill practice this skill. He understood that even if he had not come, the girl would still have killed him. Afterwards, he began to leave the battlefield because his mission was completed, and passing near Wang Jin, who thanked him, he told her to be more careful on the way back. The girl turned her head and asked the main character what his name was, to which he immediately and without turning his head, answered what his name was. The girl, looking at Tang Ming, did not expect that there was also a student at the school who was engaged in cultivation. She did not understand how she had never heard of him before. Guanzhen High School. Everyone in the class where the main character was discussing the same news, namely that Sister Wang Jin was able to kill a first-class cultivator. Tang Ming, who was sitting by himself in the distance of the classroom, suddenly someone turns to him. It was Wang Jin, who, after going around the entire school, finally found the main character. From her words, it was clear that she did not expect that he was only a sophomore. There was another guy standing next to her. His name was Xiu Feng. He was a senior who was ranked second in school, a follower of Wang Jin. The main character asked what they needed from him, to which the girl replied that she just came to him to thank him. According to her, she told him that she herself could not have killed Zhao Hu without his help last night. After hearing the words, everyone in the class began to whisper among themselves, because they could not believe that Tang Ming also fought in that battle. No one could have thought that the hero was so strong, because even school teachers could not cope with a first-class cultivator. Xiu Feng, with a smile on his face, put his hand on his shoulder and began to praise Tang Ming for not being afraid of a first-class opponent and fighting him. His courage was worthy of praise. But then he leaned closer to the main character and continued his speech with a more intense tone of voice. In his words, one could hear statements with which he tried to break the guy's fighting spirit. After these words, all the people in the class immediately changed their minds about Tang Ming, because they immediately began to ridicule him for not doing anything in that battle. Xiu Feng, despite everything, continued to say slightly humiliating words to the main character. Tang Ming didn't want to listen to any more of this, so he began to remove the guy's hand from his shoulder. Looking at the mean guy, the main character silently understood that this guy rejected him right in public. The girl, at the same moment, when she was about to leave, told the hero that if he needed help in the future, he just needed to tell her. It was clear from her facial expression that she wanted to sincerely thank the guy somehow. After that, she began to leave, and Xiu Feng still remained standing near Tang Ming's table. Finally, he leaned towards the hero and decided with an evil smile to threaten him so that he would no longer approach Wang Jin. After this, their dialogue stopped, and events moved to the intermediate testing, where the main character is already called to the stage. Tang Ming entered the testing stage and began to show the lightning that came from his hands. Only a true cultivator could possess such abilities. Everyone was shocked by what they saw at the protagonist's abilities, and finally began to believe that that night he also fought with Wang Jin on equal terms against the criminal. The girl, standing to the side of the crowd, understood that the main character was diligently hiding his real strength, and behind her stood Xiu Feng, who silently looked with wariness either at the girl or at the abilities of the protagonist, when suddenly he begins to turn to his friend, who was standing behind him with a sly smile on his face. He wanted so that Gu Qian would fight Tang Ming so that he would know the guy's real strength. When the main character was already leaving the stage, suddenly someone started shouting at him from the center of the crowd. It was just Gu Qian, who on behalf of Xiu Feng wanted to fight the hero. He walked past the teacher and continued to approach Tang Ming, trying to lure him into fighting him. The main character immediately agreed to a duel with the senior student to test his strength. According to the teacher, it was clear that Gu Qian had considerable strength, so she warned the guy to be careful with the senior student. After this, Tang Ming immediately took a fighting stance and began calling out to his opponent to attack him. Gu Qian did not come up with any tactics, so he immediately began to attack head-on. The teacher, watching the boys fight, panicked very much because she understood that Gu Qian's strength was extremely great, that even ordinary teachers could not defeat him. But Wang Jin, who stood next to her, reassured her that Gu Qian was not Tang Ming's rival. The senior student tried with all his might to land at least one blow on the guy, but nothing came of it, despite the fact that his attacks were too fast. But it was too slow for the main character, so he even taunted his opponent a little. Gu Qian tried to grab the main character, but he successfully dodged him and jumped up. While dodging the senior student's attacks, Tang Ming talked about his mistakes. Because of these words, Gu Qian became even more angry, so much so that he was covered in furious red energy. The teacher excitedly began to warn Gu Qian that he had already exceeded his limit. This blow could already be fatal, but for the senior student, it was on the contrary for the better. He did not hesitate, so he immediately began to attack the main character. Tang Ming easily dodged his opponent's attack by jumping over him. At that very second, he delivers a crushing blow from his foot in flight, thereby defeating the senior student in one fell swoop. Landing back, he confidently did not even look at his defeated opponent, because he understood that he would not get up for the next few days. His friends began to run to Gu Qian, who could not believe what was happening. No one could believe that a senior student, namely Gu Qian, was defeated with one blow from the main character, because such an event was a real shame for a senior student. Suddenly, Tang Ming raised his hand a little and pointed it at the crowd of people where Xiu Feng was standing. He invited the cunning man to fight him, because he considered it ugly to send others to fight instead of himself. Xiu Feng immediately agreed to the protagonist's proposal with confidence, but he still couldn't believe why Tang Ming had so much impudence towards him. After the two of them were on the battle stage, Xiu Feng immediately took a fighting stance and a terrible energy began to emanate from him. He was confident in his goals, so today he wanted to break all the bones of the main character. While watching, the teacher and Wang Jin discussed Xiu Feng's technique because this technique was Xiu Feng's family. The teacher heard that unformed interstitial air pressure is used to increase the performance of the heart and increase physical qualities several times. This was the first time she had seen such a technique. Xiu Feng assumed that the martial arts skills taught at school were only at a beginner level, which meant that Tang Ming's physical strength had decreased, and Xiu Feng expected that the hero would lose. He continued to attack the main character with an evil smile. No one knew except him that everything would end badly, because he was simply using a drug that would make the hero writhe in pain inside and outside. The guys continued to fight against each other, and Xiu Feng at the same moment was thinking about how he could simply evade responsibility, because his father knew many officials, so in his opinion, crushing the main character would be as easy as shelling pears. Tang Ming instantly stopped the scoundrel's attack with one hand, and after that, he began to talk about Feng's father, but he didn't want to listen. His only goal was that he wanted to kill the main character. Tang Ming carefully analyzed the movements of his opponent, and at the same second remembered his father, because it was Shu Hai who went over to the side of the aliens and helped destroy humanity. And Xiu Feng's basic movements are exactly the same as those described in the news during the war. He jumped away from the scoundrel and asked whether Xiu Feng believed that he would defeat him. He was confidently ready to defeat Xiu Feng even without special techniques. But the scoundrel did not listen to the words of the main character, so he immediately began to attack the guy with deceptive confidence. But Tang Ming didn't waste any more time. He immediately launched a knee strike to his opponent's stomach. Standing in front of Xiu Feng, who could barely stand on his knees, He continued to scold him for using prohibited techniques in this fight, because he was able to increase his physical abilities, but his speed became much slower. Feng did not lose hope, so he tried to attack the main character again, but he easily immobilized his hand because it was too easy for him. Even Xiu Feng's fighting skills, which are taught at school, are also underdeveloped. He did not feel sorry for his opponent, so he continued to say humiliating words and then decided to finish him off. Tang Ming dealt numerous blows to Xiu Feng, and then he hit him right off the leg, causing the bastard to fly several meters away from him. Xiu's friends began to run up to him because they were very worried and could not believe that their friend could lose to the main character. At the same moment, Tang Ming was standing and looking at them, who told Xiu Feng that he was too weak and therefore he was not interested in fighting him. Xiu Feng looked at the main character with a desperate look and could not believe that he was capable of such a thing. Watching his opponent being taken away by his friends, Tang Ming silently pondered what would happen next to Feng. After all, he had inserted a vital point into him and hidden him. When the chi seed germinates, then Xiu Feng will become a useless human being. The main character accidentally learned this ability in a past life. No one will be able to find and trace the root of the seed. Everyone will think that there is something wrong with the person himself. At this point, the teacher announced to all participants that the cultivator test was completed. The next stage was a written test, so everyone had to go to the office. The teacher told Tang Ming that he would go first, and then added that he would not forget to come to the director tomorrow. After this, Wang Jin approached him, who warned the protagonist that Xiu Feng would report him, so he needed to be more careful. She was ready to help him at any time. The guy thanked him for his concern, but he still wanted to deal with his problems himself. Passing by the crowd, everyone stared at the girl again. All the school children admired her very much, but in the distance of the crowd, there was a suspicious person, who slowly and quietly took out a knife from his pocket. And then he sharply tried to attack the girl, but she was already ready for an attack, so she easily defended herself from her. While she was fighting off one bandit, a second bandit began running towards her from behind. But the girl successfully dodged this attack. Weapons were prohibited on school grounds, so she left them at home, but she was sure they wouldn't be able to harm her anyway. But still, the girl could not understand why the killers dared to attack at the school, despite the alliance. The other guys wanted to help the girls, but she asked not to approach her. She asked them to bring her an iron blade and call the teachers. She understood that in a life-and-death battle, other students would not be able to help. As soon as the school children began to run for the blade, suddenly someone flew past them. It was Tang Ming who was rushing to help the girl. He knew that there would be an attack, because in a past life it was Xiu Feng who helped her, which is why he became close to her. Now it's time for the protagonist to strike and get the resources necessary to practice secret techniques. One of the killers with a knife began rushing towards the girl from the side, but the main character stops him, thereby covering the girl with his hand. The guys immediately turned their backs to each other to protect themselves. Tang Ming managed to immobilize the killer in a few seconds using a grappling move that was taught in high school. At the same time, when ordinary school children watched the fight, they admired the main character and the girl, because they were the same age, but many times stronger than them. While everyone admired Tang Ming, he himself did not think about others. It was more important for him to deal with the killer as quickly as possible in order to avoid surprise attacks. But suddenly the killer pulls out a second knife from his sleeve, and then he throws it straight at the main character. At the same moment, the girl fought against her opponent, dodging his attacks. During the fight, Wang Jin noticed that her opponent was very dangerous. He had not spoken a word since the start of the battle, so she assumed that he was a member of a large family. Suddenly, a blade flies at her opponent from which he miraculously escaped. This was an attack from Tang Ming, who was already ready to fight against the second enemy because he didn't want to, for the girl to fight him without a weapon. At the same moment, the girl was very surprised that the main character was able to deal with his opponent so quickly. He immediately began to rush into battle, and the girl thereby remained in place. While observing the main character, she noticed that his strength had improved significantly over the past few days. While fighting against the assassin, Tang Ming understood that there was no point in sparing his enemy. After all, they were not ordinary people. They had first-class martial arts skills, which meant that he would not be able to obtain any information anyway. He hit his opponent's chest with his palm, because of which the enemy began to pour blood from his mouth. After that, he immediately fell to the ground. All this was due to the fact that the protagonist's striking power was becoming stronger every day, and therefore he was able to destroy the enemy's heart with one blow. The girl came closer to examine the killer's body, but at the same time she was more worried about the fact that Tang Ming had already saved her twice. After that, she pulled back the collar and saw a mark there on her neck. The main character immediately recognized this mark because this mark was one of the 13 families, Morongo. While the main character was thinking about why this family decided to kill Wang Jin, the girl herself turned to him. She didn't want Tang Ming to interfere with these families' problems because it only concerned her family. But the guy decided to interrupt the girl because he wanted to talk to her alone. They moved to a more deserted place, and after that, the main character immediately began to tell the girl about the alien stone. The girl, pondering the words of the protagonist, was ready to help him get them. But he had to tell her about his goal. He started talking about his abilities. The stone's ability was to surpass the speed of spiritual energy. This would help it slow down the rate of cell regeneration, to improve control. The girl wanted to make sure that the main character clearly understood the possible risks that threatened him, because if something went wrong, it could get to the point where the person would simply die. Tang Ming understood all of this, but he had reasons to quickly increase his strength. He convinced the girl that everything would work out for him. He just needed someone to accompany him, as he was worried about outside influence. The girl immediately replied that she was ready to help him, because he had already saved her twice. Events shift to the Wang family hospital. The girl brought the main character to this place and brought with her an alien and forbidden stone. She urged the guy not to worry because this was her family's hospital, and the cultivator guarding it was nearby, so no one would disturb him. Wang Jin extended 2 hands forward to the hero to give him 2 stones. After that, Tang Ming immediately began to go to his cell, while the girl remained outside to make sure that no one would disturb the guy. She began to activate the process by controlling the camera with a graphical interface. After this, the doors immediately closed, and Tang Ming sat on the floor, crossed his legs, and began to concentrate, holding a stone in his hands. The theory of mastering this cultivation is as follows. First, you need to break the boundaries of your own body and use internal resources. The essence of it all was the release of energy and prolongation of life. However, this arcane magic contradicts the hypothesis. It teaches the main character to use the available resources and energy of each cell for the education and development of these same cells. If he constantly mobilizes available resources, his cultivation path will be in jeopardy. At this time, when Tang Ming was in full concentration, a girl who was worried about the guy looked at him. Suddenly, the light bulb began to glow red, and then the entire control panel began to glow red. This was all due to the fact that the heartbeat had stopped, body temperature dropped, and no signs of life were found. Wang Jin began to worry a lot out of excitement, which is why she was all sweaty. She didn't understand what she needed to do because the guy didn't tell her anything about it. But suddenly a strange energy began to emanate from the cell, and the doors immediately opened after that. The main character, who could barely stand on his feet, came out of the cell completely in pairs. The secret of this technique is in danger, but he has found a way to enter a state of false death in a past life. This method was able to minimize cell activity, and that is the only reason he was able to survive. The girl, out of strong feelings of excitement, immediately attacked the main character. She immediately blushed because of her actions, and so she jumped back. The girl with an embarrassed voice told Tang Ming that she was very worried that his heart had stopped. But the main character reassured her by the fact that it was a secret technique, but it was very demanding. The girl with a reddened face was very interested in what the guy would do next, because his strength increased very quickly. The guy looked at her, and then they went to the hallway because the main character wanted to join the martial arts competition. Everyone who stood behind the guys was shocked that Tang Ming, being in the 11th grade, could already join such a competition. To ensure that the main character was definitely accepted into this competition, the girl decided to become a guarantor between the teacher and the guy. She assured that he was ready for such a test. The teacher, after listening to the children, told the guy to go and report this to the director. After that, the main character immediately headed there, passing by Xiufeng and his friends. The scoundrel wanted to harm him, so he asked his friends to beat everything they could out of him. With great anger, he wanted the hero to lie in bed for the rest of his life. A few minutes later, Tang Ming was still able to reach the director, whose name was Guan Chen. With a smile on his face, He did not think that his school could have a second cultivator of the first stage, because before that, there was only Wang Jin. He asked the guy to demonstrate his abilities. The main character did not hesitate for long, so he immediately began to demonstrate his abilities. The director was shocked by what he saw, that his strength was different from other first-class cultivators. After finishing demonstrating his abilities, Tang Ming wondered if he would be allowed to take part in the competition, to which the director answered his question positively with great joy. He also added that from now on the doors to the school are wide open for the main character. But inside he was more happy because another gifted student had appeared in his school, and this would help his career growth in the future. After listening to the answer, the guys began to head in the opposite direction. The girl said that the director had great connections, so she advised not to ignore his offer of help to the main character. Walking and listening to the girl, Tang Ming recalled a past life in which Wang Jin became one of the best fighters in the world. At the time of the Alien War, she received great fame, but suddenly someone appears in front of them. These were three guys who looked like they wanted to harm the main character. These were messengers from Xiu Feng, and they gave off a strange aura. Tang Ming immediately realized who it was, so he asked Wang Jin to continue walking to the designated place, and he himself would help the guys. He began to walk away with the unfamiliar guys in the other direction so that no one would see their fight. The girl, not suspecting anything, watched as the main character walked further and further, and at the same moment Xiu Feng stood behind her, emanating a dark aura. He wished with great anger that the main character would be beaten. Having reached the roof, the hooligans began to prepare for a battle with the hero. Tang Ming didn't want to hide the fact that he didn't know anything, so he immediately said that he knew who they were from. But still, he understood that Xiu Feng was underestimating him since he sent such weak characters against him. But the scoundrels were serious. They were sure that they would deal with the main character very quickly. Therefore, they did not waste time, but immediately attacked him. The main character expected this to happen, so he smiled. After a few seconds, all the scoundrels were defeated by him. After that, he shook the dust from his shoulders and turned back, where Wang Jin was already waiting for him, who had stood even earlier and watched the guys fight. She understood that these guys were sent by Xiu Feng. The girl told the guy to be careful, because Feng would never leave someone alone until he took revenge on him. She was ready to help the guy by telling her family to give a warning to the Xiu family, but the guy didn't really want anyone to stand up for him. He stepped onto the fence, and then asked the girl how Xiu Hai achieved such strength. According to the girl, Xiu Hai gained strength 10 years ago when he acquired the ancient abilities of cultivators. But he still couldn't understand how Xiu Hai was able to master these ancient abilities, because to master such power, he needed to be at least a 5th-class cultivator, and he was only a 2nd class. The girl could not understand what he meant. Tang Ming continued his speech. He doubted that the people in this city were not a means to gain advantage, forming some kind of hidden network. He knew that Xiu Hai was just a link in the chain, but in any case, he was not doing anything good for the city. While the girl was making her assumptions, the main character said some strange speech, which made it clear that Xiu Hai could have passed through the black hole in the city 10 years ago. The girl with a serious face understood what the guy was talking about. Most likely Xiu Hai worked with aliens. The main character wanted them to look at where Xiu Hai spends his money. When checking his data, they should not miss anything. Events shift to Xiu Hai's corporation in Guanzhen. A certain hand with a ring on its finger is holding a leaf. And then this man tells his servants to bring the scoundrels who fought against the main character. It was the hand of Xiu Hai, who was sitting in his chair smoking a cigar. His servants began to talk about who killed Zhao Hu, because this was of great interest to the owner of the corporation. After hearing the family's name, he immediately understood who they were talking about, because his son was in love with this girl. He exhaled steam and ordered his men to send a person who was to inform Xiu Feng that he must stay out of this and stop being dramatic, otherwise he would ruin his plan. He put out his cigar on the ashtray, and then he got up from the table. From now on, everything the main character does will be like walking on a blade. One wrong move, and everything will collapse. Events returned to the Wang family's laboratory, where Tang Ming was once again in a cell. He only had to repeat it twice more, and his body would become the same as that of a first-class cultivator. He can become stronger in the future. But suddenly the guy interrupts the conversation because he remembers that he had something in his pocket for the girl. He took out a strange book from him, which contained old-fashioned healing methods that would be useful to the girl in the future. Wang Jin picked up the book and immediately began to read it. She was glad that her hypothesis of a healing method was amazing, along with notes about swords. These were the answers to her unresolved questions. With a happy smile, she thanked the main character for this book, but the guy told her that in fact, he himself learned a lot from her. He figured he was the only one telling her this. The girl blushed very much, and therefore bowed her head and decided to continue the dialogue. She asked that he now simply call her Zin, because they were partners. The guy also blushed because of this, but still agreed to call her that. Wang Jin told the main character that she asked her people to watch Shu Hai because he had a lot of money in the company account that was not accounted for. At that very moment, Tang Ming realized that in his entire life, he had never felt such embarrassing emotions as he did now because he had trained himself all his life. After that, he continued the conversation by saying that they needed to be more careful because it took Shu Hai 10 years to become an influential figure in Guanzhen. He understood that it was not just that someone was behind him. The girl with a smile on her face asked him to leave it all to the Cultivator Alliance, so he didn't have to worry so much. The guys still continued to look and smile at each other. Guangzhen National Martial Arts Stadium, where the participants look at the graphic screen in which Wang Jin was. She fought against her teacher. The girl did not give her opponent a chance because she held the blade of the sword right next to his head. After the girl's victory, Tang Ming began to enter the battlefield. He stood opposite his opponent and asked for the fight to begin. All he needed was to simply hold out for just 3 minutes. As soon as the start of the fight was announced, the main character immediately raised his fist. He held his hand clenched into a fist in front of him, and at the same time a strange aura emanated from him. His opponent at that moment stood in complete shock because he did not understand what was happening. When the smoke cleared more, the teacher immediately realized that he was beyond the field of participation, which meant that the main character was passing further. Even the teacher himself could not understand why everything happened so quickly. At some point he thought it was all a joke, but it was all in real life. Everyone around began to discuss the fact that Tang Ming was able to defeat his teacher, who was a first-class cultivator, with one single movement of his hand. After the test was completed, the participants stood in the crowd and discussed what the results were, because everyone was interested in what they had on the results table. Looking at the rank sheet, one could see that Tang Ming was in first place everywhere. Wang Jin was in second, and Shou Feng was in third. The guys stood together and looked at the list of ranks, and everyone around them was whispering, because the first and second places in the country were in the same school. The two of them could easily enter any university in the country, and for the school director, this was absolutely wonderful. Wang Jin was not at all sad that she was in second place. On the contrary, she was happy for the hero, because by training him, he was able to surpass her. But the guy said that he was just lucky, although in truth, fortunately, experience from his past life helped him take first place. The girl decided to ask him what university he wanted to go to which the guy did not hesitate to answer. He immediately said that he was in Hanbei. Wang Jin was surprised that he entered this university. Hanbei was always among the top 10 in the country, but they had little practice. And at Manhwa University, where she entered, there was a lot of practice, and therefore they usually became 7th, 8th rank cultivators. But Tang Ming did not want to change his decision. On the contrary, he advised the girl to go to Hanbei, because during her previous life, this university published a breakthrough discovery in the field of cultivator quality, which led to the Second World Magic Revolution. He added to his advice that he couldn't tell her everything, but she could trust him. The girl looked at him and did not understand whether he wanted to live a normal life or not. But after a few seconds, she agreed to the protagonist's proposal, and therefore she also now wants to go to Hanbei. At the same moment, Shou Feng could be seen from the distant crowd looking at the guys. He was always reassured by his father, but these two continued to irritate him. Broken-eyed, he wanted to get his father's help to level up this summer. He was very eager to crush the main character. Events are transferred to the Guangzhen Tunnel's dungeon, where two strangers were walking along a long dungeon. They were a second-year and a third-year student at the Imperial City Military Academy. Their names were Yao Ming and Wang Changfeng. Suddenly they knocked down the doors, thereby breaking into a certain room, posing as if they are the police. They walked into a distant room where there were vacuums standing around in which there were unconscious human bodies. Yao Ming looked at these bodies and realized that they were all criminals who had disappeared over the past couple of years. Chang Feng immediately understood what was happening here, so he wanted to quickly inform the Alliance so that Xu Hai would be arrested. After this, the events returned to the intensive care unit of the Xu family hospital. Xu Hai stood next to the assistant, and they both looked at Xu Feng, who was lying unconscious on the bed. He suffered a serious injury when his spiritual energy went out of control during training. Nobody knew who did it, because the gods found him already unconscious. Suddenly, at this moment, the doors open from which the police appear. They came here for Xu Hai because he was suspected of hiding criminals, conducting experiments on people. He was declared a national criminal, so he had to go with them. The assistant tried to stand up for his master, but one of the Alliance employees explained on what grounds they were right. Xu Hai tilted his head and asked them if it was because of them that his son was in such a state. But the employee could not understand what they were talking about. Suddenly, Xu Hai presses the employee's head into the concrete with one hand. The employees could not believe their eyes what Xu Hai was doing. They tried to stop him. Xu Hai did not think to obey the policeman. He approached them with rage because he wanted to kill them all. All the police immediately realized that in front of them was a fourth-class cultivator, which meant that none of them could handle him. So they decided to retreat. But suddenly a bloody glow appeared, and a second later everyone was killed and lying on the floor. Xu Hai approached one of the corpses and took his note. On this note were written the names of those who revealed it. Realizing that his secret had been revealed, he knew that now there was no turning back. He could not allow his son to fall to the Alliance. He brought his hand closer to Xiu Feng and asked him not to worry, because he would take care and send these two to him to keep him company. After that, a radiance began to appear around the lying Xiu Feng, in which he gradually drowned. After walking for a while, new employees came to the department, and before their eyes a picture appeared in which all their comrades were simply brutally killed. Yao Ming told her Captain Chang Feng that it was likely that Xu Hai had escaped, which meant that the Alliance had to be warned so that they would block the exit from the city. The girl was ready to contact them right away, but suddenly some lists caught her eye. On this sheet were two photographs with names. These were photographs of Wang Jin and Tang Ming, while a complete nightmare was happening in the hospital. At the same moment, the train was heading to Manhwa. On this train were Tang Ming and Wang Jin, who, without suspecting anything, simply chatted with each other carefree. The guy still couldn't believe that the girl would so easily agree to enter the same university with him. But the girl with a reddened and sweet face looked at the main character. She said that her family and she herself were not against her going there, when suddenly an unfamiliar voice is heard throughout the carriage. It was Yao Ming who came to find the main character. Yao Ming immediately pounced on her younger brother with a smile because she had not seen him for a long time. His parents were subordinates to Yao Ming's parents, and their families had always been close. But in the First War, their parents died, and Yao Ming was transferred to the Imperial Military Academy. He was able not to worry about the means and well-being of his life precisely because of her. While the older sister was climbing to kiss her younger brother, at that very second Wang Jin was watching all this, who was jealous of the guy for her sister. Chang Feng appeared behind the main character, who was glad to meet him. He told the guys that they were on a mission, and he told about the fact that Xu Hai had been discovered, so he was now on the run and in search of the guys. Suddenly, everything around them began to shake. They began to think that it was an earthquake, but suddenly people started running from the next room, shouting that there was a terrorist there. Yao Ming immediately after the order of her captain began to evacuate the passengers, thereby asking them to follow her. Suddenly Tang Ming felt that someone was approaching them. From the distance of the room, the silhouette of Xu Hai, who was very angry with the main character, was visible through the smoke and fire. They stood opposite each other on opposite sides of the carriage. And Xu Hai, with rage in his eyes, said that he had to kill his son in cold blood, so he thirsted for revenge and wanted to kill the guys. Tang Ming covered Wang Jin with himself, trying to protect her from this madman. And Chang Feng tried to calm down Xu Hai, so that he would just leave here, because he understood that the three of them had no chance to defeat him. But Xu Hai understood that when everything was revealed, neither Earthlings nor aliens would tolerate him, so it was best for him to kill these two. He would only be satisfied when they were both dead. Chang Feng realized that he had no other choice, so he immediately took a fighting stance and ordered the guys to leave, and he and Yao Ming would remain to detain Xu Hai. But Tang Ming did not want to run away. On the contrary, he was ready for battle. because he understood that running away was the stupidest decision that could be come up with. Wang Jin also wanted to fight, and her strength had also increased recently, which gave her confidence that she could damage Xu Hai. Chang Feng was humbled by the guy's decision, and so he immediately told him a plan of what to do. At that very moment, Xu Hai was already waiting for them, who was completely distraught. He was confident that it would not be difficult for him to defeat all four of them, so he waited for the moment of battle. Chang Feng began to attack first with his sword, from which blue lightning appeared. With his attack, he was still able to cut the enemy's hand, but this was not critical for Xu Hai. Under the fire of the main character, he was still able to retreat back from the captain. As Tang Ming continued to throw stones, he pondered about the imperial sword, which was an extremely rare weapon, because only a few cultivators with a class above 5th grade had them. This meant that Chang Feng was very worthy of warriors, since he wielded such a sword. He continued to throw stones, which Xu Hai successfully knocked away with his hand. At that same second, Yao Ming ran towards the madman. She activated the spirit technique, because of which there was an excellent opportunity to wound the madman. But Xu Hai manages to cover his chest with his hand, thereby allowing himself to be wounded by the sword. He realized that it was Yao Ming who posed the greatest danger to him, because she owned the spirit technique, so he immediately began to attack her. But the girl did not panic at all. She again activated the spirit technique on the enemy, thus immobilizing him again. Wasting no time, Chang Feng quickly approached the enemy to try to protect the girl and also kill Xu Hai. But because of this, on the contrary, he became even more insane. From his scream, everything began to shake, and a terrible force began to spill out of him, which made all the guys shake. Yao Ming was thrown back due to the strong wave that came from the madman, after Xu Hai attacked Chang Feng. As soon as this happened, the captain immediately understood Xu Hai's attack. He deliberately pretended to be tired, and when they loosened their grip, he suddenly exploded to defeat us in one fell swoop. With a smile on his face, the madman understood that he had no chance of escaping from persecution, so he decided to simply take the main character and Wang Jin with him to that world, because he only had 1 or 2 hours to live. But for him, it was more than enough to kill them. He took off from the ground with great speed and began to quickly close the distance to Tang Ming. But the guy wasn't worried at all. He waited for Xu Hai to approach him and then began to strike at him, because the 4th-class cultivator was seriously injured, which meant that even a student like him could defeat him. He swung harder and hit the madman straight, but his hand began to shake from the blow because Xu Hai's body was hardened. Immediately after the unsuccessful attack, the big man began to attack the main character because he realized that time was approaching the end. He grabbed the guy's hand, and with a terrible crazy smile he told him terrible things. Sitting away from what was happening was Yao Ming, who was worried and could not get up due to the wounds she received in battle. But at the same moment, Wang Jin rushed to the main character's aid, who with a determined look was ready to put an end to Xu Hai once and for all. She quickly descended towards the enemy in order to pierce him with her sword. The madman had no idea that he was in danger from behind. Chang Feng looked at the girl's action from the side and understood that the girl was in a hurry to attack. If she chooses the wrong moment, then nothing will work out for her. Suddenly someone activated a spirit technique on Xu Hai. It was Wang Jin, but she made a big mistake because of this technique, the madman noticed her. He managed to cover himself and protect himself from the blow with his hand, thereby releasing the main character. After the girl's repelled attack, she simply lost all her strength and fell to the ground near the enemy. Xu Hai continued to get more and more angry. He now wanted to kill not only the guys, but everyone on this train. The madman began to laugh louder and louder, and an even more terrible energy emanated from him than before. At that same moment, the captain decided to ask why he did this and decided to work with aliens, to which he began to answer that they helped him survive the alien war that took place several years ago. He didn't blame the aliens for this, he only blamed the human government. Yao Ming was listening to what Xu Hai was saying at that moment. He blamed the government for sending him to certain death, but suddenly he stopped telling them, because he realized that it didn't mean anything to him anymore. He knew that sooner or later aliens would land on Earth, and all humanity would come to an end. Suddenly, Tang Ming interrupted Xu Hai. He confidently said that humanity would remain alive, and he himself would personally send all the aliens to the depths of the universe. The madman looked at the guy and laughed at this, because the aliens were already studying the method of people and cultivation, which meant that they were already developing a plan for victory. Listening to Shu Hai, the main character now understood how in his past life the aliens so quickly studied all of humanity. He was surprised that there were so many traitors on Earth who helped them. Chang Feng tried to find out who else helped the aliens, but Shu Hai didn't even think about answering this question. After that, he clenched his fist because he was tired of having a dialogue with the guys. He wanted them to die, so he wanted to kill them as quickly as possible. Tang Ming at that moment looked at the madman and understood that in order to stop him, he would have to call on some of the forces from his past life. Shu Hai did not wait for anything, and therefore immediately began to attack the main character. But Tang Ming was able to easily stop the madman's strike. After that, he began to attack the big man and hit different areas of the muscles of his body. He could easily strike him and also dodge oncoming strikes. As soon as he reached the correct position, he immediately struck the place where Shu Hai's heart was with his palm. Standing on the sidelines watching the battle were Yao Ming and Chang Feng, who were very surprised by the protagonist's abilities because his strength exceeded that of a first-class cultivator. But Chang Feng understood the strength of the protagonist. He relied on his eyesight and could easily find Shu Hai's weak points, which he then struck at. His abilities were much higher than those of Yao Ming and the Jin. Chang Feng at this moment was asking only one question. Why had he not heard his name before? While the guy was striking at Shu Hai, he simply looked at the main character, because his body was so strong that the guy could not penetrate him, but he could immobilize him. He was so confident in his victory that he simply ignored a large number of blows to his body. Tang Ming stopped to rest, feeling very tired, because he continued to hit the madman's body. Shu Hai looked at the main character with a satisfied smile, because he could not do anything. But suddenly he notices that his body could not move or budge. He started screaming at Tang Ming in a panic because he was shocked by what was happening to his body. The guy looked at his enemy with a satisfied expression on his face, because he understood that he could not do anything to him. He learned this technique from an ancient book on medicine that was written by ancient cultivators. But Shu Hai did not want to believe his words, because he did not believe that such a thing was even possible, because all cultivators tempered their bodies. It was then that Tang Ming looked at him with a cool look, and then explained that everything was in the internal organs. These words slightly misunderstood the madman, because he could not fully understand what the main character was talking about. Tang Ming began to explain to Shu Hai that his organs were no different from those of ordinary people, which meant that they were vulnerable just like everyone else. Suddenly, the guy slammed his hand on the wall. He told his opponent with a smile how he achieved such a technique. Because of the slamming on the wall, Shu Hai shook a little. He could not understand how the main character was able to use bodily force, because this technique belonged to the Fang family. After the guy removed his palm from the wall, one could see the impact mark on it. He looked at Shu Hai with a slightly insidious smile, and then wished him a good night's sleep. A second after the words were spoken, blood began to flow from the madman's eyes and mouth, and he began to fall to the ground. He couldn't believe that he was defeated and killed by the main character. As soon as he fell and the guy was convinced of his victory, Tang Ming immediately approached Wang Jin to ask if she was okay. The girl sweetly replied that she was fine. Because of this answer, the guy blushed, but still he decided to help her up. Chang Feng was delighted with the guy's fight because he did not expect such abilities from Tang Ming. Yao Ming immediately began to praise his brother, and then she began to call him to her so that he could help her get up. While the guy was lifting his sister, Chang Feng stood to the side, looking at him carefully. He was thinking about the fact that the heads of the families had already entered into an agreement for the Jin to marry the heir of another aristocratic family. Chang Feng understood that if people found out that Tang Ming and Jin were very close to each other, they would have a lot of problems. But still, he was ready, in gratitude for saving lives. If something happened, he would do his best, using his connections, to help him. After everything is resolved, the events are transferred to the Hanbei railway station, where everyone looked at the main character because his older sister hugged him and sobbed loudly because he was leaving her. She continued to rejoice and cry at the achievements that her younger brother was able to achieve earlier, but the guy smiled sweetly and reassured her, saying that he was no longer a child, so she didn't have to worry about him. Chang Feng and Wang Jin stood behind them. He told the girl not to go further and not get closer to each other. He reminded her that her parents had already entered into a marriage contract with the heir of another aristocratic family, which could not be dissolved. With sadness on her face, the girl said that she herself knew about it. She stood silently with her head bowed and holding her suitcase. Meanwhile, in front of the Hanbei train station, there was a tent in which there was a reception room for Hanbei University. He wrote down in the magazine who had already been admitted to their university. Suddenly, someone came up to him and asked if new freshmen were being registered here, to which he immediately said with a friendly smile that it was here. As soon as he opened his eyes, he saw Tang Ming and Wang Jin in front of him, who had already arrived. They introduced themselves by their names so that they could be recorded in the reception register. Hearing the guys' names, Li Jiahan was shocked who stood in front of him. After that, he immediately started screaming and pointing his finger at them, because he couldn't believe that the first and second place in the country were standing in front of him. All the freshmen around were also shocked. They immediately attacked the guys and began asking them about their capabilities. The main character and Wang Jin were a little dumbfounded by this turn of events, because they could not even imagine that they were so famous to ordinary freshmen. At the same time, on the other side, a certain girl, as soon as she got off the train, started shouting that she had finally arrived in Hanbei. Her name was Fang Xiaoying, and she ranked third in the National Martial Arts exam. She ran away from her grandfather because she did not want him to continue to control her. Fang Xiaoying did not want to let him do this, so she considered herself a genius who had not been born in the family for more than 100 years. The girl wanted to quickly get the title of 9th grade cultivator in order to surprise this old man and see how ashamed he was. She came to the reception with a smile on her face because she thought that everyone would greet her here. But then she saw that in front of her were Tang Ming and Wang Jin, around whom all attention was concentrated. Fang Xiaoying did not judge people by simple assessment, so she still considered herself better than them. Suddenly the main character noticed her, who immediately asked the mentor whether it was Fang Xiaoying or not. He knew it, because in his past life, when the theory about breaking through the 9th grade limit came out, it was personally verified by a 9th grade cultivator from the Fang family. A few months later, he became the first person to go beyond the physically possible. Suddenly, his thoughts are interrupted by Wang Jin, who said that Fang Xiaoying was very strong and could reach first class without problems. The Fang family's profound strength technique is the same as the Wang family's sword strength. They can kill higher-level opponents with powerful hidden powers.